Before we do get into today's video, I'll just mention the fact that content in the game to actually cover at the moment is exceptionally light, and what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to be one of these creators that's going to bring up a Reddit or a tweet and read that out and pad it for 8 minutes just for the sake of putting content out. So if there's nothing really to cover, then the channel might be a little bit lighter, but when it is lighter, what I'll actually do instead, I'll look to do some more streams on Twitch. That's something I've just actually started doing. I'll put a link to the Twitch channel in the comments below. I'm having a whole lot of fun doing that, and I'm seeing a lot of people coming over from YouTube to Twitch, and we're having a great time as well. But for the video today, this is going to be tied in with the last update, the Tachyon Rift. So previously there were 2 elements to building your character that I would say were absolutely vital if you wanted to take them to the next level. With the Tachyon Rifts, we now have a 3rd element as well. So in this video, firstly I'll break down and run over the 3 elements, and I'll tell you why they're so important, and then from there I'm actually going to go into each of the 6 heroes, and I'll talk about how we can best apply those elements to each of the heroes as well. So let's jump in and let's discuss what the 3 elements are first. If you're someone that has played the game a lot, you will very likely know what these 3 elements are, but we'll quickly run over them just for players that maybe don't put as much time in. And then as mentioned, what we're going to do is we're going to run through each of the individual heroes and talk about how you can apply the elements as well. But the first one is your damage buff. The buff you get in this is absolutely insane. It's actually an additional 60% damage and then a 35% flat crit rate, which is huge. The amount of proficiency you would have to stack, I'm not even sure if you can get your crit rate that high, getting proficiency on every single gear piece to get as high as this 35%, so this really is incredible. You've then got your positive and negative status effects, and they will essentially double your damage. So what you'll do, if you're not sure how this works, is you have warm and cold status effects. Your warm ones are cosmic, plasma and pim, and your cold ones are cryo, gamma and shock. Now if you fill up on one of the statuses and then use the opposite status, you'll get your double damage there. And then with the patch that just came out there, we've actually got our Tachyon Rift gear now, and that can offer you up to 50% additional status damage. So if you put all them together, your damage buff, your positive and negative status effects, your status damage increase from your Tachyon, then you can really get insane damage numbers. So that's a breakdown of the 3 different elements. Let's now jump into each of the 6 different heroes, and I'll tell you the best way to actually apply these 3 different elements to them. So the first hero we'll start off with is actually my favourite character in the game. She can be run as a ranged or melee character, so we'll cover both of them. I'll just mention in regards to the Tachyon buff, in case you're not sure where you get this, it's via the new Tachyon Rifts. It can appear, I believe, on legendary and exotic gear. It's most definitely on exotic, but I'm pretty certain it can appear on the legendary as well. But if you look at the range build for Black Widow first, what you would look for on your slot 2, which is your ranged one, you're looking for Tachyon on range crit and cosmic, plasma or pim. The reason you're going for a warm status effect is that you can apply the cold status effect shock via Widow's Bite, so that works out really nice. For the slot 4, this is where I get the damage buff. You could look for the Berserker perk, where when you get 16 attacks in quick succession without being hit yourself, you'll gain a damage buff. Now, the way you want to proc this on a ranged Black Widow is pull out the dual pistols, and you can fire off those 16 shots in around about 2 or 3 seconds if you tap the button quick enough. Now, in regards to the status effect, I'll also quickly mention that Plasma can work really nice, because Plasma works as a fire dot essentially. Now every time that actually ticks, it will count towards the Berserker buff, so if you fire it on a range of enemies and you've got all the different ticks going off, it will help you get the damage buff as well there. For the melee setup, you can't actually get the damage buff on melee crit at all, unfortunately. It only appears on your ranged crit. So that means for your slot 1 for a melee character, you're looking for your Tachyon buff on melee crit, and that most definitely does drop. And then your status effects are the same. You're going for the warm one there due to the way your actual assault heroic works, applying the cold status effect. In regards to your damage buff, you can try and get it via slot 2, because even on a melee Black Widow, occasionally you will be firing off your guns. More than likely you'll be firing off your machine gun 1 that fires all the bullets, so there's a high chance to get a crit in that. And also you can get it on the slot 4 as well, and that will be on enemy defeat. But that's Black Widow. Let's check out the next character. We have Captain America up next. Now I know that some people are having success on a ranged build, but he is primarily a melee character, that's all I will cover here. But you've got on your slot 1 your Tachyon on melee crit, and I've got a warm or cold status effect. Now the fact that I don't actually choose one over the other is other characters have inherently got status effects as part of their kit. Cap doesn't actually have that, so you can go warm or cold, but then that means when you get to the slot 2 you'll be looking for the opposite effect, so that's why it says warm or cold for slot 2. In regards to the slot 3, being a melee tank character, you'll be taking damage very often, so what you're looking for is the reactive perk, and that will give you your damage buff and you'll get really high uptime on that. We have another melee character up next here, so it is the Incredible Hulk. Now on the slot 1 you go for Tachyon on melee crit. In regards to your status effect, you go for a warm status effect, so you go for Cosmic, Plasma or PIM. The reason for that is that in various areas of his kit he can actually apply Gamma, which is a cold status effect. In regards to the slot 2, I use this to supplement the cold status effect you can already apply via your heroics, so again it's Cryo, Shock or Gamma. I will mention as well that sometimes it can be quite difficult to actually apply your opposite status effect on range, but if you actually pull out the rubble from the ground, that's when he runs around with the huge bit of rubble, and you actually spin that around or slam enemies with it, that will still count as a ranged attack and it will fill up that particular range status. That's something to bear in mind. For the slot 3, because he is taking a ton of damage, you've got the reactive perk there that will give you your damage buff. Now he does have the overcharge status, that means of course if he's taking damage he's not getting overcharge status, but it's simply too hard to maintain that, and I would much rather have the more regular damage buff instead. The next character we have is another one that can be ran as either ranged or melee. So for ranged first, on the slot 1 you're looking for your cold effect, so it can be Cryo, Shock or Gamma. You want this on signature attacks, so that's when you hold down the light attack button, you actually fly up in the air and you slam down. Now as a little tip, you can actually cast this really quickly if what you do prior to actually holding down the light attack button is just tap the jump button to hover and hold down the light attack button, and you'll slam down straight away, and then immediately just tap the button to hover again, and you can repeat that and you slam up and down like you're jumping on a trampoline essentially, so it's really nice for applying that. For your slot 2, you've got your damage buff on range crit, you'll be getting this really often on him, and your status effect, you're going for a warm one, you're going for Cosmic, Plasma or PIM. The reason this works really well, it's not only alongside the slot 1, but also when you use the arc field on Iron Man, which is his support heroic, you'll be applying shock damage to enemies, which is a cold status effect, and that works great alongside this warm status effect. It doubles your damage when you're overcharged. In regards to your Tachyon, it's not ideal, but I would go for the slot 4, which is your Tachyon on enemy defeat. When it comes to the melee setup, on the slot 1 I would go for the Tachyon buff on melee crit, and then I would go for Cryo, Gamma and Shock. Now the reason this works really nice is as a melee build you will be using his lasers as well, that's your heavy attack button, and with the lasers they actually scale off might, so it works great for the melee build, and they actually have inherent plasma in them. Now they won't fill up the plasma status bar, but for example with this setup you're running, you apply your Cryo, Shock or Gamma, which is a cold effect. If you then follow that up by using your heavy attacks which have inherent plasma in them, then you'll get your positive and negative status effect, and you end up doubling the damage of your heavy laser attacks. Really pretty amazing. In regards to your damage buff, you can get it in various different areas here. None of them are perfect, but you've got your slot 2, 3 and 4, so you can get a damage buff on range crit, you could get it on perfect evade, this is probably the weakest one, or probably the best one I would say on a melee build at least, is a damage buff on enemy defeat. So that's Iron Man. Let's have a look at Miss Marvel next. Miss Marvel's very similar to Captain America because she's a melee character and she doesn't actually have any inherent status effect as part of her kit, same as Cap. So for the slot 1 you've got Tachyon on melee crit, and I really like to use PIM on her. It's up to you which attack you actually use to proc it. I've not found one that really works better than another. The reason I like PIM is when you're using biggin on Miss Marvel you can pick up your exos and you can just slam them about, but when you actually shrink them it means you can pick up the exos even when she's not embiggened. Now on the slot 2, after you've picked up an exo for example, You want to have the negative status effect, so you'll go for cryo, shock or gamma, and it means when you're squeezing away on that particular enemy you will be doing double damage to them. In regards to your damage buff, because she's a melee character, I would go for the slot 3, so that's your reactive perk, and that would provide you with the damage buff there. Now let's check out the final character. We finish up here then with another character that's got a ranged and melee setup. Now if we look at melee first, you want to go for Tachyon buff on melee crit, and then your status effect, you can go for warm or cold. Now the reason I actually say that is you can choose warm or cold on your slot 2, but not only that, 4 actually has both warm and cold status effects as part of his kit. So on his ultimate you've got the warm status effect plasma, and on that assault heroic you have the cold status effect cryo. It depends which one you have up more often here that you want to go for. You do want to, however, have your status effect on signature attacks. That's really important. For your slot 2, when 4 throws out his hammer, one of the perks you can set up is that it doesn't actually pin an enemy, instead it causes a large explosion. Now if you actually use that and then you go for the damage buff on ranged crit, you'll get really high uptime on it, even on a melee build. You just need to throw it out every so often into a group of enemies. Status effect you're looking for, warm or cold, really depending on which heroic you're using most often, and also depending on what you've got on your slot 1. For your slot 3 and 4, these are both optional, but what you can go for to supplement the damage buff if you're struggling to get it on your ranged attacks, you can either go for the reactive perk for the damage buff, or you can go for the damage buff on enemy defeat, so it's really down to you. Finishing up with the range setup, it's really nice and simple. For your slot 2, you've got the damage buff and range crit, you'll be proccing that exceptionally often, and then you can go for your warm or cold status effect. It just depends again how you're actually running your heroics. Looking at your slot 4, this is where you would get your Tachyon, so I would go for Tachyon on enemy defeat here. So that's the setup that allows you to get all your 6 heroes and their damage numbers through the roof. Now I'm focusing on damage here, but don't actually neglect your defensive stats at all, because you will need them, especially with the cloning labs coming out and it's supposedly being really difficult. So that's something not to neglect at all. But these 3 different buffs, if you can get them all proccing at the same time, your damage numbers will be absolutely through the roof. So let me know which setups you're running, let me know if these setups have been helpful, and thanks for tuning in, stay safe, and I'll see you all again soon.